Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Carlson Cards podcast. Today should be a phenomenal episode. We have a collector who I recently did a very large deal with over like a month span that many of you heard about. And I've talked to Gunther for a long time, met him at the National last year, which was a lot of fun. And I know recently Gunther's been a little more open to doing something like this, so I bugged him quite a bit. He's a busy guy, couldn't find times that works, but then now we're here and finally recorded. So this should be a ton of fun to talk about Mr. Tom frickin' Brady, the 2000s as a whole. And just Gunther's strategy for collecting. So should be a lot of fun. So Gunther, thanks for hopping on. How are you doing? How's everything going?
Good. I'm excited to do this. Like you said, we kind of talked about not sure something I would have done, 6 months ago or something, but I kind of had a point where I was like, all right, let's talk about cards. Cause I mean, yeah, I don't really talk to people a ton about cards, like in real life, obviously it's just like through Instagram and stuff. So, I'm excited to have a conversation about it all.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's easy when you have such cool cards to talk about. So I'm sure we'll get, like you talked before, I'm like, we could probably talk for 2 hours. So we'll see how long this actually
Yeah.
goes. I have no idea if this is going to be 30 minutes or an hour and a half. We're going to find out.
Yeah, I agree. It'll depend, maybe how long winded I get and you
Yeah.
got to rein me
Or
back
when
in
my
here.
wife starts knocking on the door and wants to get going or something.
There you
That's
go.
how this goes. Yeah. You almost done, honey? You almost done? Yeah. Yeah. I'm almost
Yeah.
done. Sweet. I have to edit that out. Thanks a lot. Um, but anyways, so kind of to start again, I know about you because again, we met last year, had a good time chatting for probably 10, 15 minutes at a little Brady Manning get together for some collectors, which was a lot of fun. But I'd love if you could maybe just share whatever you're willing, personal background, maybe tied to card stuff, like how cards fit into your life. If you took a break, if you kind of came back into things, like how have cards kind of fit into that side of your life as well. I'd love if you could share here.
So my name is Gunther. I, uh, I'm from Phoenix. I live in Phoenix my whole life aside from undergrad. Currently in law school, kind of alive, kind of just surviving at this point. In regards to cards, I started. I think so. I was born in '97. My earliest memory is like in 2002. That was Yao Ming's rookie year, and my dad he would take my brother and I. I have six siblings. The one that's my youngest brother, that's the oldest, if that makes sense. We were the one that were kind of into it, and so he'd bring us to this card shop, and there was this specific product. I still have all the cards, and it was it was a pack of like three jersey cards, and the chase was Yao Ming, and we spent so much time and money in there buying this, trying to get this Yao Ming. It was so stupid looking back. I mean, obviously it was so fun, but eventually got it. And now, it's like a $35 card. But at the time, it was like the holy grail. So that's kind of where it started. My dad, he had a ton of the junk wax stuff. Like it's still in the garage, I think it at least. Unless my mom was like, "Hey, it's time to get rid of this." But that was kind of the beginning. And then in 03, 04, I still remember like you could get LeBron cards out of grocery store vending machines. And that was kind of like our reward, like, hey, go grocery shopping with me. And you can get a card out of it. And it was really like a LeBron rookie card. Obviously, it was like a dumb, like $1 Topps card, stuff like that. But and then fast forward around 06, 05, 06 is when I started to love Vince Young. And so that was the 06 class. And so I think that's kind of where it peaked for me was like all the cards I still have from there. I just have shoe boxes full of like Topps paper and Bowman paper and stuff from that draft class because I loved all those guys, but specifically Vince Young. And then after that, I honestly don't know what happened. I have zero memory of when it kind of stopped and stuff because at that time I was only like 10 or 11 or something like that. But yeah, it stopped. I obviously loved sports and stuff, but it stopped. High school, classic story. High school, college, nothing, and then 2020. I think you said you graduated 2020 as well, right?
Yeah, I was born in 97 too. I didn't realize that. So we're the
Okay,
same age. Yeah.
that's funny. Yeah. So May 2020 graduated, and I was going to take a gap year to study for the law school entrance exam, and then do the application process, and also just be home because I was away for 3 years. And a friend of mine, shout out Kaler, yeah, he was like, "Hey, have you heard that sports cards are becoming popular again?" And I was like, "Dude, no, I haven't heard that. I don't know where I would even hear that. How did you hear that?" But he knew I'd be interested because he knew like I collected the stuff when I was younger, and so that was right in the middle of like the Zion craze and stuff like that. And so yeah, I got back into it at that point, and I don't know how much further you want me to go into like the actual moving forwards part, but that's kind of like the origin leading up to the return.
No, that's yeah, good background. We can dive more in as we get
Okay.
going, but it's interesting because born in the same year, graduated at college, obviously same year then. But I also think we got into cards around the same time because mine was also I graduated college. For those of you that don't know, I moved to Michigan for work because that's where my job was. And then there's COVID, right? There's nothing going on, but I kept seeing random Facebook ads for like a local card show, and then I think I saw some stupid again like a Gary V like reel or YouTube
Oh yeah.
clip of like look at how Giannis prices were this, now they're this, now they're this. And I had always bought and sold stuff on eBay for years and years because we used to garage sale before it
Yeah.
was popular and you see it online all the time now. But my family had done that, my parents had done that. And we would always hunt video games, stuff like that. So then I was like, again, you're sitting there, I have nothing to do. And maybe it's similar to for you is like, well, this seems kind of interesting. Like again, if you could at the time for me is like make a little money doing this, that's great. But I also love sports and I've never even considered like collecting something like this, so it's kind of cool. But it's cool how we have some overlap there in terms of timing. I'd be curious now if you could kind of step a little bit further because again, I know my story of how I kind of was lost for a couple of years, then found football maybe 2, 3 ish years ago, I guess. Right? I mean, again, I haven't been collecting football super long, but I've dove right in. What was your journey? Did you get caught up in the random crap at that time, or did you right away just say, I'm gonna go collect Tom Brady. I'm gonna go collect, all these Vince Young, these players that you used to like. Like, what was your story there?
No, our stories are similar. I think it's a similar story for a lot of us that collect football. Like when I got in 2020, I think it must have been around. It might have been a little earlier. Now I'm thinking about it, but it was like that spring, May, whatever, 2020. And the first thing you see when you go on YouTube is like sports card investor and Gary Vee and stuff like that. And at that point, I was like, I know nothing. It was kind of exciting, and we kind of talked about you like the analytics and all that stuff. I'm the same way. It was exciting that I knew nothing, and so I was looking for something that could give me that information. And hilariously enough, that the only thing that really I don't think Card Ladder existed at that time. I love
No,
Card
no.
Ladder. Okay, good.
Well, it maybe
So
existed, but definitely no like sales history, none of that. But
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So it was I went on and like the sports card investor app was like the first thing that like would provide you information like that again, as far as we know. And so I was like, I want to learn about this. And so it was like I'd be studying. I studied way too much for the LSAT, and then during my breaks in the nighttime, that's kind of like the escape. It was like looking into all this stuff and learning about it just because it was so interesting. And I kind of learned again, it was only through, but like you mentioned, it was kind of only through the lens of basketball because that's what everybody was. That's what you're told to collect because that's what the majority of people collected. International, blah blah blah, all that nonsense. And so I started to do the research of it all, and I was buying, like you mentioned, I bought like I was thinking about it on the way out when I was driving home from class. It was like a 2013 Select Giannis base, and it was like that was the greatest thing ever. It was like the pivot off of the Prism, and then I remember I had
because you
like a
were getting
2000.
creative and kind of spicy. You had to try something a little
Exactly.
less mainstream, so it was the select bait. Mine was the well, first was the Tyler Hero 2019 Prism BGS 95 for like $90, and I
Yeah.
felt like crazy doing that. And then I spun off and I got like a Jaron Jackson Jr. Red Ice, and I'm like, I'm gonna get really creative here and try something that's short print. Sounds like
Yeah.
yours was similar there.
Oh, exactly. I have a photo of it where it's like I owned like 30 Giannis prison bases, and it was 'cause that's what everybody wanted. That's what I was trying to find. And then, like you said, I got spicy one time, and I had like a red wave, and I'm like, dude, this is awesome. I don't think red waves were even numbered in 2019, but yeah, and so that's kind of what it was for that whole first year. And then it got to, and it was at the point also real fast. The around I think it was August of 2020 or something like that. It was like the sports card investor like top five. Remember that they do like the top five like increasing card stuff. And I remember it was like a Deshaun Watson 2017 Prism or whatever, like the silvers were Prism. And I bought one thinking like, oh, this card is going up in value. I'm supposed to buy one. In reality, it was like that individual had most likely already bought, sold at this magical price, and is now making content out of it. And I bought it for like $800, and like a month later, it's 400. And that's when I got pissed off. I was like, okay, you're an idiot. You just wasted it's $400, but it was stupid. And so that's when I kind of started to learn. And finally, in December of 2020, I think this is the correct timeline. December 2020, I had the epiphany. I'm like, the only athlete that you actually care about is Tom Brady, and you haven't never considered owning a card of him, you're a moron. And so then I but I was trying to be smart. And so it was December 2020, and I was like, hey, here's how this works. The odds are that your favorite player isn't going to win the Super Bowl, so wait till after the playoffs. And of course, that was when in February, he won the Super Bowl. And so I tried to be smart and I ended up screwing myself because once he won the seventh, that's when his stuff went absolutely absurd. And so that was kind of like the initial, hey, what are you? And at the time, I owned, like I said, that Giannis. I had like a 2004 Topps Chrome base LeBron. The coolest one was this optic lime green Luca. And again, I looked at him like, dude, what are you doing? You do not care about these. You don't find them interesting, and a lot of these guys I didn't even actually like. So finally, I was like, dude, it was so stupid though. It was finally like, hey, epiphany moment. You care about one person. That's probably who you should be buying cards of. So it was kind of December 2020 was when that happened.
I have to imagine my timing's pretty dang similar. And it was interesting though, again, that time, because I know for those of us that were around then, which probably a lot of you listening, the market was crazy 2020, 2021 for a while as well, especially football, I think, and Tom Brady, I think, went very nuts. But then it seemed like there was this mass exodus after that. I don't know if you felt that. It was a big wave of people that left. And then I think you saw this big change in football cards, at least I remember for Tom Brady, where it was so expensive. Then it started to become kind of reasonable again. Is that kind of when you really started diving into Tom Brady? Like, what point were you diving in? And then I guess, how did you discover the sets you like? I'm curious on that side of things. Like, when did you buy your first finest card? When did does any of that come to
Yeah.
mind?
Yeah. There's a lot there. I'll try and
Yeah, I just tossed a
not
lot
be
at
too.
you.
I'll try not to be too long winded on it all.
Yeah.
But so for the first part about like I bought the first Tom Brady card I ever bought. I don't own it. It's very sad that I don't. But it was April of 2021. I don't know if you remember. Drake sent an exquisite. It has 4 patch windows, and one of them's usually a shield, not usually, but it's at a 10. A lot of them are shield. He sent that to auction recently. It was the Brady of that. And I remember I bought it for like 2 grand or something. And it was a decent amount of money at that time for the cards I was buying, but it was also, it was just super cool. And that was the first one I got. And when I got it in the mail, I remember realizing like, this is what you were supposed to be doing. Like, this is the stuff that excites you. And then from then on, it kind of the same thing when I talked about, I didn't know anything. That was the exciting part, was trying to figure out what I liked. And at that time, that's when PRIZM was going crazy. Like, uh,
Like the
so this
silvers,
was
like just all the random years, all the
every
everything pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, everything, and then especially it was early. I went back and looked to make sure, but like early 2021 was when PRIZM kind of first started to get some excitement. Not first, but like when it started to get a lot of excitement. We are selling for thousands. Because if you go back to like 2019, the PRIZM stuff of Brady was literally hundreds of dollars. A lot of the sales, like 2017, 2018, was literally hundreds of dollars. And then I think it was 2021. There was like a gold vinyl, 17 gold vinyl. I did like 5 grand or something. And then this is gonna piss you off as much as it pissed me off. There's a sale from May 2020 of a 2012 PRIZM Gold BGS9 Brady for 7 grand, and I'm just like, dude, you were in cards at that point,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
That's the
you technically could have owned that card.
Yep, that's the kicker of it all, right? I think about that all the time, especially, yeah, a topic that I have to ask you about
Yeah,
after this. Remind me as you keep going, but
yeah,
is I wonder if our story of how we found football is why we see sales like this, where there was like these really cheap stuff. Is it because all of us dummies were just completely not paying attention, even though it was so
yes,
obvious? Like, I have no
yes.
idea.
Yeah, I agree. And so it was so yeah, that was 2021 where I was kind of buying. That's when stuff was going ballistic, and at that time I was just studying for the LSAT, and so that's when that summer I bought my first like gold. It was the 2003 Topps Chrome Gold Extra Extra out of 101, but it was a weekly wrap up version, and that was the first time I bought a gold one. And I remember I bought it and like a month later, like sold it for like $500 more or something. And I thought it was like the coolest thing ever because I wasn't working at the time. I was only studying and applying for school. And I was like, kind of like you said, this could be like, why not make some money off of this? And because this stuff is going so crazy, and it just kind of led into that's when I started flipping all this stuff kind of in that era. Um, and so, in regards to how I got into like the finest stuff, I think it took years of like during that flipping process, I think I subconsciously started to like certain cards and move away from certain cards. And I think that in regards to moving away from certain cards, I think the PRIZM stuff is what I was moving away from in regards to my interests because I think that's what was being propped up the most. And I'm not going to pretend like I wasn't also like, oh, PRIZM's the greatest, PRIZM Gold's the greatest thing ever. And I'd also like to say I do think PRIZM is great. But like we kind of just talked about some of those sales where it was like, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a 2018 PRIZM Gold Brady BGS9 that sold on eBay in November of 2021 and did like 60 grand or something. And that's truly like like within Brady and like Prism Gold in general, that was, at least from my perspective, that's when it was just like, this is absolutely absurd. And that's when, things went crazy. And that's when I attempted to capitalize on that through my buying and selling of Prism and Gold and stuff like Prism Gold and stuff like that. And same thing with Kaboom. It was like, I remember in January, I think it's 2021, there was a guy who had all of the 2018 gold Kabooms of Brady. He had all 10 of them. And then he had the green one as well. And then he had the second year green one as well. And I like, that was when I just started considering buying Brady, and he wanted like 2 grand or something for it, for a BGS 9. And I was like, dude, there's no way this is 2 grand. I remember I actually sent it to Kevin. I was like, hey, there's this guy that has all, because Kevin and then like Sportfish, Jason, those are like the first few accounts I looked at when they had the shiny stuff where I was like, now this is cool. And so I'd bug them all the time with questions and whatnot. And I sent him all of those, like trying to get his opinion. And I forget what he said, but I ended up not buying one. And then like 4 months later in 2021, it exploded and it was like 10 grand or something. And I was like, dude, you're an absolute moron. And so the point of all that was that I think that in that process of flipping and my relationship to that kind of era of cards, it was like it was a lot more transactional than opposed to me loving them. And like I did flip a lot of like top stuff and stuff like that, but I think that throughout that process, I was building my interest in top stuff as I was doing that. And I think a lot of it has to do also with, that's kind of the era that I collected when I was younger. Like that, it was that 2002 or whatever it was to 2008 or something like that. So like I have the tops, the paper versions of all those cards. Um, and so I think I'm sure there's nostalgia there. Like nostalgia is the vast majority of all this for us. And so there's some nostalgia there, and then specifically, I mean, I won't get into like the design stuff too much until we talk about the actual cards, but I just think the designs of the top stuff are so cool and so unique. And like, remember you talk about 2002 finest, and you say it reminds you of like the computer lab stuff, like the fonts and all that stuff on it. I just think it's nostalgic for me, which is so, it sounds dumb, but that's what so much of this is.
Yeah,
And
no,
then,
that totally makes sense. Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, one last thing, and this is long. I think so. What I like so much about the Topps era stuff is the fact that you have to educate yourself to know that this stuff even exists. Like it's cool. So like you mentioned, you like to research stuff and look into stuff, and the fact that you like in Prism, it's like it's known the Prism Gold out of 10 it has a lineage, etc. All that stuff. It's simple to understand. I think there's a lot of benefits to that, but I think there's so much fun in attempting to understand what the best stuff is of your player from this era, discovering it, and then trying to find the person that's owned it for 20 years, and you have to try and pry it away from them.
Yeah, no, I totally makes sense. I've thought of that too, where this era, it's like there's not a clear, to your point, like a hierarchy. Like you don't even know what's out there if you want to go
Yeah.
collect Vince Young. Like, to your point, you don't even
Mhm.
know what's out there until you start researching and seeing other people who collect this era and that sort of thing. One question I want to ask you, because it's weird the mirrors in our stories here, because again, like I feel like the same time you were buying and selling Brady, I was buying and selling random players that I cared nothing about. Again, same idea. At what point did you turn from like, this is a great way to make some money while I'm coming out or in college, coming out of college, not have a lot of income, to now you're at the point where obviously you collect a lot of this stuff? Like, when did that barrier break? Because I felt like for me, and again, maybe if this helps your thoughts here a little bit, it was like right after that mass exodus of Instagram, where it kind of was this big purge and it was seemed like the market kind of relaxed. Then I was like, well, if I'm going to be here, I'm going to start collecting more. And again, that's probably when you see my page really start, and that sort of thing was around this time frame. And then I got really into collecting. I think I've met a lot of people who the story is very similar. Like they're young like us, they come in just to make some money, set up at shows, blah, blah, blah. But then all of a sudden now we're collecting and buying a lot of these cards in this era. So I'm curious, like, do you think, number one, the question is, did the flipping and whatever help you learn the market, I'm sure, but did that help lead you to now collecting? And like, when did that occur? I'm curious on that side of things.
Yeah, I think the flipping certainly led to that point, kind of in what I said about how I was able to like the cards that I was able to own during that period, like a vast majority of his best cards, I've owned one of them at some point. And so I was able to have them, have an experience with them, determine what I actually liked, and kind of reflect on, hey, I like this specific Prism year, et cetera. I like this Tops year. And a lot of times it was like I'd get a card that was everyone else was excited about, and I get it, and I was like, dude, I don't care for this. This doesn't do it for me. And so I think like that you said it was January 2023 was when it was like it felt like a ghost town. It's kind of
Yeah,
like what you're
and
saying
that,
about
like,
Instagram.
crazy exodus,
Yeah,
again, and that's fairly recent even, but not really, that's like 2 years ago, it's been a while, but that was when the
yeah,
big exodus, I agree with you, where it's like, "This is quiet."
yeah, and there's a lot of backstory there that we can talk about if we have time and if you ask the question. But like the that during that 2022, like there's reasons why that happened, specifically in Brady's market. And I remember it was that fall of 2022 when there was an absurd amount of his best cards were sent to auction because he was forced to. The individual was forced to, and it happened to a few other people. And it was all of Brady's best cards. Like few people had so many of them that they sent them to auction. And there's a few people, and I only bought one card from that time. It was the 2011 Super, where I was like, dude, it's so hard for me to believe that this card is worth this value. And I love this card more than this value is suggesting to where I think I need to own it. And, the people that bought it at that time were geniuses. And I did it more as like I barely did it. Like I wasn't a genius to where to where I bought everything. Sorry. Um, so it became January 2023, kind of going off what I was just saying, where I was like, okay, it is hard for me to believe that this is not my best opportunity to buy these cards that I now know that I actually like. It was hard for me to believe that moving forward, this wasn't going to be the best time for me to do that because of what had just happened. Like, when else in the history of or the future of his market are every single best gold card of his going to be sent, the vast majority going to be sent to auction at one time and all this stuff. And so in January 2023, I made a list and I figured out exactly what I wanted. And I realized that so much of it was the top stuff, and specifically so much of it was the finest stuff. And I knew about all that stuff from when I was flipping. Um, to where it helped impact my decisions of what I actually liked and what I wanted to own long term. Cards that I was going to want to keep for a long time, as opposed to just getting them for the excitement of that short term. The dopamine hit. Like Brett always talks about that, versus cards that I truly wanted to own for the sake of building a collection.
Yeah, no, this I'm glad you brought up the Brady exodus because I remember that too. I remember, like you mentioned, the super you picked up. I know other people who grabbed some stuff. I know there's a 2013 Select Gold that ended at a price that I think we would have
Yeah,
both been very happy buying at.
yeah,
Um, so part of this, and again, I didn't expect you this direction, but I think this is a really interesting topic. Is like I kind of feel, and this is just my opinion, and I'm curious what you think. Like echoes of prior to that, right now, where I see these big accounts grabbing all of this stuff, probably very leveraged, paying prices that are crazy. I know of like specifically Brady stuff that people bought during that exodus, and then now they're being offered 3, 4 times what they paid then for it. Um, so I like to me as somebody who's went through it one time, and again, there's people listening who have, been around way longer than us. But to me, it seems like this is kind of an echo again, where there's this just weird stuff happening in this market. I know I haven't bought a lot except from you. Obviously, I bought a large car from you recently. Um, it feels like again we're at this point in the market where I guess my point being where it feels like it's more advantageous to be selling than buying. Do you agree right now? What are your general thoughts on this? Like, do you think there's going to be an opportunity then, and hopefully, I mean, you're not a future teller here, but like, I just feel like around the corner, there's gonna be a much better time to buy this stuff. I don't know about you. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts.
I completely agree that it seems similar to that time period. Um, I thought it was funny. Literally the other day, I was thinking about this. How there's and I'm friends with some of these people. Where there certain accounts have a large majority of these cards, and the question becomes, can those individuals hang on to those cards? And I think that this time could be different because I believe that they can. Um, and I also believe that that exodus that you talked about, where all the high end cards crashed, I think it was so awesome because it removed people that were in it for those specific reasons. And like we've both mentioned, we flipped and stuff. Like we were in it for those reasons to an extent, but ultimately said, "Hey, I actually do really enjoy owning these cards and stuff." It came around to that. But I think the people that didn't, and it was purely monetary, they were removed. And obviously, some still exist and stuff like that. But I think that it was awesome because so many of them were removed. Where I think we moved forwards with a much healthier group of individuals that wanted to actually own these cards. And I think specifically, like I won't talk outside of the Brady market much, but I think specifically within the people that collect Brady cards, um, I think that they're in way better hands because those people that own those cards, a lot of them sold them during those kind of peak times with the intent of eventually kind of getting the back. And that's kind of what has happened recently is people are getting those grail level cards and they're just excited to own them and they want to keep them for the sake of owning them. And I think the fact that we had the mass exodus, it was kind of a cleansing. There's a chance that that opportunity, that future opportunity doesn't actually exist. And now I think it varies by player as well. Like there are certain cards of players that I think that what you're saying is certainly applicable to where this doesn't make sense. Like you talked about in your story this morning, even there was like, I think it was like Adrian Peterson rookie card, stuff like that, where I think that's certainly true. Because there's people that want to capitalize on excitement, and there's certainly more excitement now than there was last year and the year before that, et cetera. So I think it's true, certainly to an extent, but I think there's a chance that my belief is that if there's a card at this point that you love, and be cautious in regards to what that player is, you have to consider all the different characteristics, but I would say get it. If it's rare enough to where it's like, hey, you have the opportunity to buy this, you don't know when the next one is going to be. At least for me, that's what I'm doing, buying cards that I don't know when I'm going to be able to see the next one. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying there, and I think that's where you have to draw that line of what is that card that fits that boat versus I'd love to own this, but the price feels like it doesn't make sense to me right now, and I think I can get
Absolutely,
another opportunity. I think, yeah, I fully
absolutely.
agree with you. Again, a random direction I didn't expect to go, but I was thinking of this morning, and a lot of what you're saying, again, I agree with, and we've never talked about this, but it's interesting that you have similar experiences and thoughts about this. And for those listening that maybe feel like again they're in a weird point where they're being priced out of stuff or that sort of thing. Again, maybe some of this resonates and, get some different thoughts on it. But all right, so now we will kick this over to your first honorable mention for the Mount Rushmore. We have one honorable mention and then four actual Mount Rushmore cards. So this one I've actually seen once prior, and I love the design. I'd love you to talk about this card, what you like about it, any acquisition stories, anything you like, and then a reminder here, Gunther, as we move through these. Some people don't have a visual, so if you could just describe, what the card is, say it out loud, and then what you think about the design, that sort of thing.
All right, so this is the 2017 PRIZM stained glass gold or gold mojo of Brady. It's a BGS 9. So I absolutely love this card. The thing is, all these I'm probably gonna say this every time a card comes up here because I do love all these ones that I own. I own them because I love the design. Like the visual appearance to cards is the number one factor for me. Like people, the first like when people say people love rookie cards because they're the first, it's the rookie card, etc. But for me, I personally don't care about rookie cards. It's all about the visual appearance, and this is one of those cards where when I got it the first time, I was shocked by it, by how visually appealing it was. This card has a funny story. I owned it in, I want to say, yeah, it was 2021, late 2021. I owned this copy. I own it again, but I owned it back then. This exact copy, and this image is from 2021. I sent it to Nick Warp Sports Cards. I sent it to him to auction for me using this photo, and because at that time that's when I was funding the 2017 Prism Finite, and so I had to sell a bunch of cards like this that I thought were awesome, but it was for the greater good. And so I auctioned this with him, and that was that sale from 2021. And then I think it went through the hands of a few people, ended up on the PWCC marketplace. Someone bought it recently, and then I got it in trade. But I I owned this in 2021, and then I hadn't seen it for 3 years, and I hadn't seen this card in 3 years in terms of like actually seeing it in person. And so I was able to get a PSA 10 copy of this in like February or March of this year. And I remember when I got it in the mail and pulled it out, it was one of those cards where it was just like, holy shit, this is awesome. And usually if I don't have that feeling, I don't keep the card. But this is one where I pulled it out and immediately I was like, dude, I do not remember this being this awesome. It's a pop. The PSA 10 was pop 2. I eventually owned both of them this year, and then a few months ago I moved both of them. And I remember when I moved them, it was just like I love my cards and I love owning them. But when you own cards of this value, um, for me, I'm always conscious of the value of them. It's at the end of the day, I have a wife. I eventually plan to have a family, things like that. And so I moved those two, but as soon as I moved them, I was like, dude, why did you not keep one of them? Like just for the sake of having the card. And I'm kind of I'm a clown about grades. I always want the highest graded, but this is one where I was like, I'm okay with just getting a lower grade because I want to have the card. Um, I personally prefer the 2017 to the 2018. There's like the other people that have them, like Kevin and Sportfish has one. They both have a copy, I believe. And I think that they both prefer the 2018, and a lot of people do prefer the 2018, but I think the 2017 for me is better. I just like I like him standing in the center of the card like that. The 2018 certainly has an awesome shine to, but I just love the design of this one. I love this. This is my second favorite Panini card from the entire catalog of Panini cards for Brady specifically. This is my personal second favorite card of his from the entire catalog. And I honestly don't think it's one that people know a ton about. Honestly, think if Kevin hadn't posted his and hadn't like given it attention over the last few years, I don't think people would really know that it exists. And it has a lot to do with the fact that there's only 10 players in the set. So it's an insert, obviously, but there's only 10 players. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but there's only 10 players within that for these gold mojos. Fortunately, one of them is Mahomes. And so I think that's such an awesome card. Um, and if I was somebody like the Prism Golds are a crazy amount of money. I don't know what the Mahomes stained glass would be, but in my opinion, it's one of those cards that I think is going to be sneaky long term. Again, this is more like to the value side of it. But the biggest factor is the visual appearance of the card, and it's second to a card we'll get to later, in my opinion. Yeah, I just love the look of the card. It's one of those cards where, like I said, I got in the mail, and I was like, wow, this is awesome, and I didn't remember it being this awesome.
That's incredible. And I think it's funny, too, you mentioned just how there's these random I mean, imagine the Panini catalog. Again, there's gotta be so many random situate not so many, but there's definitely a few situations like this where it's a small checklist, but a great design. Maybe the specific parallel is awesome, like the gold here. But in reality, like you just said, there's only 100 total copies in gold if it's a 10-player checklist. And if there's only two big names, most of us, like you said, probably have never seen these because I think the other players in this are not super well known, right? I mean, it's like what I've seen Antonio Brown or something. I mean, there's not that many big name players in this, right?
Yeah, there's a Ezekiel Elliott, which Pat Nicholson
Oh
he
yeah,
posted
yep.
kind of recently, and then there's a classic like Mitch Trubisky and Deshaun Watson. So those are like kind of the rookies from the class. I think I don't even remember. I don't want to guess who the others were, but
No, but there's not a lot
I've
of big
looked a few
names though,
times.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
moral of
no,
the story, there's not that many. Yep.
yeah, there's some decent guys in it, but it's not like for the most part, it's not big guys, or it's people that were supposed to be good and aren't.
Classic football analogy right there. All these guys we
Yeah.
think are gonna be good and then they're not. That's
Yes,
unfor
exactly.
that's the unforgiving side of football, I feel like, I don't know if you feel this way too, but you see NBA, these players who are crap getting, like, super maxes, and then in the NFL, I guess the same thing happens, right? These especially quarterbacks, you get these huge contracts. They just flame out after, like, 2 years. I mean, especially in football, I think it's so unforgiving in that regard.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be I think it'd be fun to own a team and manage a team, but at the end of the day, it's just there's so much shooting in the dark. It'd be very difficult,
Yeah,
especially
totally,
when it comes to
totally.
quarterbacks.
Awesome. So now we'll jump to the full Mount Rushmore, and yeah, literally when you sent these, I was like, "Dear Lord." This is I mean, to me, again, I think some would argue the left card you could maybe replace with another Panini card that I'm sure you're aware of probably what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
But other than that, I mean, I think this is like a consensus best gold shiny you could possibly have as a Mount Rushmore, in my opinion, especially just aesthetics wise, like to your point. So I'm
yeah,
super excited for you to talk about all these. I don't know if you want to start with the left one or whichever one you want to start with. Just feel free to go with it like you just did.
yeah. We can start keep the Panini train going here. So the first one is a 2013 Select Gold PSA 10. Tom Brady, obviously.
I've
Oh, these are all
never
Tom
seen
Brady. I'll
never
just
seen
skip
one
that
of
part.
these. They're cool. I've never
Yeah. So
seen one of these.
yes,
No, just kidding.
there's somebody I've seen recently is trying to go for the set. I think he's insane for doing it. Yeah, dude, when you first said that you were going for this set, and then after hearing you explain it, I couldn't. I think it's the absolute perfect set, and I think you started at the absolute perfect time. Um, I think it's going to be so cool when it's finished. Um, I I I couldn't attempt to do this. I think that you're awesome for doing. I mean, I believe you'll eventually complete it, but I could never. It's
You know,
so difficult.
the funny thing is with the Chase, I mean, it's definitely financially a big investment, right? I bought like obviously we know what I paid for the Brady, right?
Yeah,
These aren't cheap cards per se, especially not anymore. When I was first buying them, they were. But it's funny because I want the home, like we're planning on building a home one day, and I want the home built so I could have these displayed perfectly and secure with a secure security system or something. But it's funny by going for the set, I'm probably delaying the home by months at least.
that's true.
Kind of funny how that
That's
goes. But
hilarious.
anyways, enough about my cards. What do you like about this card here?
Um, Okay, yeah. So this is my personal favorite Panini era card. So like you mentioned, obviously, most people prefer the 2012 Prism Gold. Respect. Do would I love to own that card? Yeah, sure. But this is my design wise. This is my not even design wise. This is just my favorite Panini card. I think the design of 2013 Select is so superior to all the following years of Select and Prism and Optic. Uh, Again, obviously, just my opinion, but I just think it's the I mean, it's essentially a portrait. I think that might be what I like the most of it. It's a portrait. It has that dark background. It's funny you mentioned the other day the whole people don't like the
Pictures.
Wemby curtain. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't. I made a post making fun of it, and it's funny you said that. But I love it on this card, so maybe I'm a hypocrite there. But I just think it's so nice, and the most important part to me is the shine of it. It's unlike anything else. Everybody always says it. You've already talked about it a million times, so I won't repeat it. But like that 2013 Prism and the Select years, that the shine was different, and there truly isn't. I've never owned a 2013 Prism, but I've owned 15 onwards of Brady of all of his gold. So I've seen a vast majority of the Prisms, and it's not even close in my opinion. I think this card is way prettier. I think it's far superior, and I've owned three of these. The nine that Joey has, I owned. Um, the PSN I bought it, and then we sent to auction, and then that's when that guy had to send it to auction because he got screwed, and then Joey bought it like a genius, and we all looked at him. Now look at him like he was a genius. And then
Hey, guess
obviously I had
what?
my
He's always the genius. That's the moral of the
he
story there.
really is. It's pretty
That's the guy when
awesome.
he starts selling cards, that's when I'm like, "Okay, he knows something I don't. This is probably the right time to let go of some fringe stuff."
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. He's been in this long enough, and he's intelligent enough to where he's yeah, it's a good he's a good North Star to have. And
And
then your
this
copy,
is the E-Trader for anyone wondering.
yes,
If you
yes,
look
the
on
E Trader
Instagram,
Joey.
sorry, we're using a lot of first names. If you listen to the podcast, you know those people, but yeah, this is the dot E dot trader, I believe is his full Instagram. But yeah.
Yeah, so and then I got my 9.5 that you own. I got it at National that we met at in 2023. So I had that for a year, or whatever, and then I got I got this copy, which it used to be a True Gem. Used to be a True Gem. I got it in trade a few months ago. And shout out DT Sports Cards. He brought it to National. I didn't go. He brought it to National for me, and he crossed it. And I was certain it was going to cross. The card is perfect. No, I don't usually like say, "Hey, this is going to PSA 10" because you never know what's going to happen. But this is one where I was like, "This has to PSA 10. This card is perfect," and it did, and I was so excited. I usually, like I mentioned, I'm a clown about owning the highest grade of stuff. Like one of the questions that we were considering talking about was like, "What do you do when you get stuck in a certain spot?"
Mhm.
And and
Oh yeah,
what
the
I've
question.
been
I'll ask this question right now if you don't mind, because I think it'll set up what you're about to say. One
okay,
of the questions I kind of gave you, I was maybe going to ask, is like a topic is the dilemmas of what do you do when you complete a PC. And I know you've mentioned to me in the past that for Brady, you're at this dilemma where you've got all the shiny stuff you want outside of maybe one of ones and $100,000 cards that you don't want to buy and couldn't possibly buy, right?
yeah.
So yeah, that's the question. I think you're getting at there. I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, so I this happened. So like when I mentioned in January 23, I made my list of what I wanted. And in April of this year was when I got the 2002 Finest Gold Gold Refractor, and that was pretty much the last card I needed from that list of cards that I made that I wanted. And my my response to what I basically like what I felt at that time, what I continue to feel is rather than like I think this happens so much is when you get a card, you then look to the next card. And
Yeah.
I was at a point where there wasn't a next card. Yeah. I mean, it's true of everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there wasn't a next card. And so it was an interesting position to be in. And what ended up happening was I just enjoyed the cards that I had because it was at a point where like when I was flipping and stuff, I'd buy a card and it was that dopamine hit where it's like, hey, you bought a card last week and it was awesome. You need a new card this week. Even though I was selling you, it was the same idea where it's like you constantly want to mail these for the excitement of it. But I just quickly realized when I was doing that, I was like, dude, you don't care about these cards. Like you're excited for literally probably 5 minutes and then you don't care. And so it got to a point where I was like, I need to make a list. Like that was one of the biggest factors in that list was like, what are cards that I'm going to be able to stare at for a long period of time and continue like having pride in owning them and loving owning them and it bringing me excitement. And so I think that's kind of what's happened is I've hit that ceiling. And so aside from being able to kind of increase grades, like I had the 9.5, once I got the 10, I was like, okay, I can move this other 9.5. And that's kind of happened with a few other cards in regards to grades. that aren't on the Mount Rushmore, but like are kind of in that 10 to 12 cards that I have that are like the collection is I just wanted to enjoy what I had. Like this might be going there's so much of like Instagram is there's a big herd mentality to Instagram. Um, and it was kind of one of the factors like when I'd buy a card because somebody else and everybody else is saying it was so awesome and I get it in the mail and it would be a letdown. I was like, dude, you're a moron. Like, why are you falling for this stuff? You need to figure out what you actually like. And so that's eventually what I did. And it's kind of where I'm at now is just enjoying what I have because I built a collection of cards that I truly love. And I think that if somebody's at a point where they feel like they've hit a ceiling in their collection, they have everything, one, you need to enjoy it, and two, if you're not actually enjoying those cards, then it's a great sign for you that you don't actually love those cards, and you need to get rid of them and figure out what you do actually love. And so I'm fortunate enough that after the years of being a clown and stuff, I figured out what it was that I liked, and we're at a point now where I have all those cards that I do want, aside from like you mentioned, a few one of ones and cards that are absurdly priced that I won't get.
Self-proclaimed clown. That's funny. I love
Yes.
self-deprecation on here. We support that fully. Random just thought, I guess. So I recorded an episode yesterday that I think will air on this Sunday, and yours will be the following. We're recording on like a Friday prior. One of the topics talked about with the guest was that her and I were just talking, and like one of the things is we were both similar age, and we are a similar age. And the way I view it, and it sounds like again probably the same for you, is like I really am trying to figure out what are the actual cards that when I have money 20, 30 years from now, hopefully from a very successful career, maybe again for you as a lawyer, that sort of thing, like what are the cards I'm going to continually come back to and wish I
Yep.
had from this era and this time? Because this is all going to be nostalgic, this stuff right here. Even if you sold it all, which you're not going to probably, but if you did, it's
Yeah.
still going to be nostalgic. So it's like for me, it's identifying those so I don't look back 30 years from now and say, like you said, you clown. Why did you not go after the ones you liked the most then? Now I'm trying to get them and they're way more expensive. And you could have been enjoying them for years. So it sounds like that's a very similar thought. Again, we kind of had a similar discussion. And I was like, some of this just started clicking for me as we were talking about it. I was like, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I think it's super hard to get to that point because it is so fun getting cards, but there comes a point where you have so many cards and you're looking at them and you're like, dude, I don't like this card is cool. Like you can have cards that you acknowledge. And again, this is the way that I've went about it. Everybody collects differently. Yeah, so this is making a generalization, but I think people get to that point eventually. Not everybody. Some people love having hundreds of cards at whatever price points and stuff, and that's what makes them happy. But I think a lot of people get to the point of what I'm talking about, what you're saying you've experienced, where you become honest with yourself essentially. And you're like, hey, this card is cool, but it doesn't excite me as much as this other one. And so why would I keep this? Aside from the fact that you love the card, maybe you want and if you love it, you keep it obviously, but you
It's like
start to
minimalism, like a minimalistic mindset
absolutely.
almost. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's hard. Once you start it, you don't stop. You realize you're like, hey, why haven't I been doing this the whole time? And then eventually you get to a point where you have all the cards that you truly do enjoy having.
Yeah.
So
No, it's good. It's good topic that again, I don't think I've ever talked about on here, but it's very interesting because I respect people that can keep it to 10 or 12. And I know I go through the phases I've mentioned here of chaos of wanting all these different sets and stuff. And then I trim down and every year you get more focused. And I think I'm just getting slower to that process than you are, but I can see the allure to it. And again, the minimalism, the simplicity, the not having 80, eras and cards and sets you're looking for, but just having the two or three. It's awesome being focused like this. Well, and then too, I mean, to your point, you're able to pull this off now, right? You're able to get these 10 or 12 cards that if you had an interest that was super wide, I can't imagine financially you'd be able to do this unless you really put the time in, that sort of thing too, I'm sure.
yeah, exactly. That's one more thing I want to say was the every time because there's times where I'm like, dude, I haven't bought a card in months, and there was times where I had like it was 6 months when I wasn't buying because nothing those cards I wanted didn't come up, and I'd almost stray, like, well, I could buy like the Black X Fractor at 25 because they're awesome and they are awesome, but it's not one of those cards, and so it's always like reminding myself, hey, if you spend money on this. When that card does come up, you're going to be pissed that you didn't just wait for this other card because you're going to end up selling that card that was kind of that fringe card, like you mentioned earlier. And so it's just constantly like reminding yourself, hey, these are the cards you love, these are the cards you want, and everything in that's not up to that point, you're most likely going to end up selling later, and you're going to feel like a clown.
Yeah. No, that's yeah, like I said, great topic. Because again, I'm sure that number varies for everybody. Like I love having a lot of cards, and some people love
Yeah, for
having
sure.
10, and some people love having 1,000. That's
Exactly.
the fun of it. But I think again, it's a great topic because I think we all hone our interests over time. So this is really great. All right, next card here. Which one do you want to touch on first?
Yeah, we'll just go in
Left
order
to
here.
right. Sure.
Yeah, so the next card is the 2002 Finest Gold Refractor Brady BGS 95. Um, so I I owned this card, not this copy, but my first like I've owned two of these ever. So it's one of those cards where it's like so it's insane. Truly is the definition of a ghost. The last, if you look on Card Ladder, the last public sale was 2011, and it is February. I think it was February 2011. It sold for $12.50. And one, that's obviously depressing. Great for that person. Hopefully, they still own it. But I mean, that's 12 years ago. And aside from the copy that because I sold my first copy, I sold to Joey.
Hmm.
And aside from, I think I may have said that already, but aside from that card, I had never heard of another transacting. And aside from his, I know where mine is, and I know where like one more is, I think. And the okay, this is kind of a tangent, but it's kind of a cool story. The card that I sold to Joey, it was raw, an hour and a half north of me since the product released. Some guy up in Prescott. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's a city it's a town or it's a city in Arizona. But yeah, it's literally an hour and a half north of me. This guy had the 2002 Prism. That's embarrassing. 2002 Finest Gold Brady just sitting there raw, like from the beginning. And my friend Bobby, he got it from him, and he had it for a few years, and he eventually gave it to me. And then when we talked about the '06 Finest Gold X Factor, I basically made the decision I had to move it. But I just thought it was so absurd that card like was sitting an hour and a half north of me. And I think it's a testament to this era of cards. There's people that loved these cards at that time period, and because they were $12 and stuff like that, they still own them. And we will never hear from them because they don't go on Instagram. They don't care. And they probably some of them probably don't know what they're worth. But yeah, so I just thought that was hilarious. It was an hour and a half north of me. This card that I wanted so bad for so long, and of course I had no idea. But so
It's
then
kind of the
this
kind of goes to the fun of the area. Sorry to interrupt for 1 second, but fun of the era, I should say, because again, if somebody has money and wants this card for $100,000, they can't even find it because you were looking for
exactly.
years. Like that's the great part of the era. Sorry to interrupt, but I had to like emphasize that point you're making.
No, yeah, I completely agree. Like in addition to like the education, all that kind of stuff that I talked about in regards to this era, that's another part of it is there's like you can't find the cards. Like we said, you go and you educate yourself on what cards you want, but then you have to go back and find them. And the issue is that by this point, a lot of these cards, like this card is 22 years old. What's the chance that somebody still owns that we haven't heard about it or hasn't transacted publicly in any manner in 12 years? It's absurd. Which I mean, I think eventually one of these is going to come up because it's insane that it hasn't. Even during the boom, like the boom brought out literally like 12, I think 10 minimum. The boom brought out 10 superfractors, and not one of these came up. It's so dumb. And so I think one will eventually, just as a matter of time, playing the odds there. But 10 superfractors came out, and an O2 Finest Gold didn't come out. I think one was on eBay for like 150 grand. That was the only copy that was like listed publicly and stuff during that. And it was taken down. And I've tried to find the owner, and the person that listed it said they don't know who it was. They listed it briefly on like their behalf, and it's gone. But so this copy specifically, and now I just went on that long tangent. This copy specifically, um, I got it this April, so it was actually my wife and I's anniversary. We were out of town for our anniversary, and there was a guy who I found it 2 years prior to me buying it, and the guy had it. And it was just one of those classic like, hey, what else you got? And he sent me this, and he sent me the next card too. And I was just like, what did I just get sent? This is absurd. I've spent how many months of this? I don't know if it was months or years looking for these, never seen one. And this guy has both of them. This is so stupid. And I said, you want to sell it to me? And he wanted the moon. And I said, I'm willing to bet on myself eventually finding a copy at a price that I'm comfortable paying. And so it was just 2 years of like checking in. And it was funny during like earlier this year, there was like three or four cards where I had checked in. And finally, after literally like most of them were at least a year, but it was a few years, 2+ years, where they were like, okay, let's figure this out. And it happened. Like that's when I got the 2013 select gold. I traded a guy for a card that I then traded to get that select gold. And it was 2+ years of begging this guy. And so finally he agreed. to come near my price of what I wanted to pay. And again, the issue is no one knows what these are worth. I have a good idea, just because I think I have a good idea of the market of this stuff, but truly no one knows. And so it's basically a shot in the dark. I paid higher than I wanted to, but I've found over the last few years of buying these cards is like if it's on the upper end of that, even if it's a little more than what you think it's worth or what it's willing to pay, if you're never gonna find another, quit being a moron and just buy the card, pay strong on it. And I did. And so finally we agreed to a price and it was so funny because like I said, we were on vacation and I was literally like running around, like just so excited. My wife, of course, like, dude, you're a clown. You're little. And again, the funniest part of this is like we're all sitting here talking about pieces of cardboard with pictures of men on it, and for some reason we get so excited about it. But I remember like finally getting this card because, like I mentioned, it's kind of like the last piece of what I needed off the list, and um, so I finally got it, and it was awesome when it finally came in the mail.
That's awesome. Is it bad? I imagine you on vacation running around like SpongeBob with his hands in the air, just
I know
out
exactly
holding
what you're
this thing.
talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely know that.
Oh
Um,
yeah, it's a
no,
classic
this is
pinball.
awesome, and I appreciate your point there because I also think there's something to be said about the fact that you're buying it and you know the price you're buying it at again versus waiting for an auction and you might get caught up or something. You know what I mean? Like there's just
Yeah.
something to be said, and I think I said this in the episode again where I talked about buying the Brady from you, where again I think I pitched a price, you kind of had a price you wanted. We met somewhere in the middle. It was probably towards the higher end of what I was willing to pay, right? But I didn't even question it because I knew that was the price. I do
Yeah.
not want to bid on one of these, and yeah, you might get pay less, you might pay more. I mean, you just don't know. I think there's something to be said about the clarity of knowing what you're paying. I don't know if you agree with that. I just think that's
Oh yeah.
great. Again, not even the sense of like you're getting a good deal, but just knowing what you're paying. I don't know. I just love that side of it. But
No, I completely agree, and that's how I felt about that situation, like, thinking about it when we were negotiating on it, I was thinking about it from your perspective, and I was like, "This is the exact situation that I have found myself in with so many of these cards to where it's like, this price may be a little more than what I wanted to pay, but it seems like it's in the area of what it's worth, and I'm not willing to gamble on waiting to not own this card or go somewhere else, or like you mentioned, it go nuclear somewhere else. When it if it did go to auction again, you know. So yeah, I completely agree. It's something that I have found in these last few years when I've paid what I thought was more than what I want. When I paid more than I wanted to, I haven't regretted it at all. When it's a caliber, when it's a card that excites you this much, and it's a card of this caliber or whatever.
yeah, especially a card that immediately jumps to your top four or top three or whatever, right? I
Yeah,
fully agree. That was that
exactly.
for me for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. So next one is insane. I gotta say the color match on these are nuts with Brady. That's just
Yeah.
really cool. So I'd love you to touch on what this one is.
So this is the 2005 finest Goldbacks Fractor out of 10, and it's at 9.5. So this is the highest graded copy. I think that I know there's at least one BGS 9. There might be two, and I know there's one PSA 9. So it's the highest graded. And like I said, I'm a clown about the grade. So this
I gotta
I like
ask
this a
you,
little
is
more.
it the grade or is it the grade plus card looks nice? Like if you had this one, but it looked worse than one of those nines, would that bother you? I'm just curious.
What do you mean? Like the
Like
card itself looked worse?
do you like I should put it this way. Like, let's say this 9.5 is truly the highest graded, but does it ever bother you where you get a card and you feel like, damn, this grade doesn't really represent the card? Like, I know with that select, you're like, I know this is a 10. It got a 10. You're like, perfect. It matches great. Like, I run into this with myself where I like see auctions of a 10 and then I end up scrutinizing it. Like, I don't think that should be a 10. Like, I'm just going to hold off. Like, do you ever run into that with yourself being a grade snob, or do you not consider it too much and kind of just trust the company?
It's hilarious you say this because I was thinking about this last night with the card I just sent to grading to where I was confident like it should have been a 9. I had a chance at a 10. When I got it back, I looked at it and I was like, if this would have been a 10, it honestly would have annoyed me because I don't think it's worthy of being a 10, it's hard because like you've mentioned, it's conflicting within myself because I want the highest graded, but then if it comes and it's not worthy of that grade, it's in my mind.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
in my mind.
especially when
This
you're
is
so familiar with the condition of a set like this, you've owned this card. I'm sure, like, own cards from this set. You know what this set looks like. Like, you're pretty well an expert in condition on something like this, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a number of reasons why these are hard to grade. It's like you said, if it had come and it wasn't, I mean, I would have kept it because I don't think I'll ever have the chance to get another one of these, unless one goes to auction. I don't do auctions much, but if one of these went to auction, I would certainly be in. And I don't like doubles either. I don't like duplicates. But this is one where I would. There's a few cards where I would. This is one of them. I don't think I've said this yet, but this is my single most favorite card. It's my favorite most favorite, is that even English?
Yeah,
This
if
is
it's
my
most favorite, sure.
okay.
I don't
This is
know.
my favorite card in my collection, and it's the most. It's my favorite card that I've ever owned. So
Mhm.
like I've owned finites, I've owned super factors, stuff like that, and this is still my favorite card. I'm not entirely sure why. I just love the design of it. I think it's so exemplary of this time period, this look of it. Like we talked about the 2002, it has a look to it where it's like it brings us back to a period. I think that this is like the epitome of that. Like there's not like when I look at Prism Gold designs, some are better than others, obviously, but for the most part, I think that they're pretty consistent. And that if you saw one and it didn't say Prism Gold on it, and you brought it to a random person, they'd identify, hey, these look alike, etc. This card is so different from that. Like it had like the random circle behind him, and then the four red.
The red color, kind of the color match too, a little bit.
Yeah, and it's funny because I prefer '06 Finest over '05. Aside from this parallel specifically is the only one where I like '05 more than '06, and I love '05, but it's like for some reason the gold X Factor it's different to me, and so I prefer the '05 over the '06 so much.
They're also, I don't know if you've noticed, I recently was talking with somebody about this, and I looked at the pop reports. It's disgusting how much harder the O5s are to find. Even if you think of Peyton
Yep.
Manning, I think the O6s I know were like 5 of them are, 4 of them are. The
Yeah.
O5s, the people that I chat with, we only knew of one, I believe, and then another one just came up. But I don't know. Have you noticed that with these, just how much harder the O5s are? Like, I think the pop report was maybe half for like the O5. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I don't know what happened there between '05 and '06, but I completely agree, and I've talked about this with a few guys before where it's like you don't see them either of them in general, but
Mhm.
you really don't see the '05. So I don't know what happened if people just didn't care about them in '05 and '06. It was like, "Oh, these are kind of cool." And so a few more of them survived, but I completely agree that the pop reports are very different.
Well, it's kinda strange too, 'cause I guess I can't think of '06 draft class super well, but '05 seems like the much better draft class in hindsight, right? But I guess that's because of Aaron Rodgers, a few other factors, so I guess maybe at the time you didn't realize, but I just wondering if that ever affects how many people are opening them, who's kind of I don't know if that has any impact or not, but
Yeah.
kinda interesting.
'06 had a good draft class too. That was I only know this because it was the
Bryce
Vince Young
Young
draft class.
too, Vince
So
Young.
it was Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush, all those guys.
So
And
popular at the time, though, that's I guess I'm maybe my point is in opposite. Maybe at the time, '06 seemed like the great draft class, whereas '05 maybe not so much. But then in hindsight,
oh,
I
gotcha,
think
gotcha.
'05 seems stronger. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, yeah, I misunderstood. No, yeah, that would make sense. It's yeah, because the '06, there's definitely I don't know. I think there's a lot of great players in that. It pisses me off that Vince Young doesn't have one of these because I'd love to own that card. He literally is just not in there. I don't know why. Like there's a Mario Williams, like
Yep.
he was I think he went number one, I think, from that draft class, and he has his gold X Factor. I've seen it on eBay a few times recently. And it just pisses me off that card does not exist uh for Vince Young.
Yeah, that's too
But
bad.
yeah, so I don't think I've said how I got this one. This one, so like I said, the guy owned both of these, and I wanted the gold X Factor more. Like I, from the start, I knew that that was the card I wanted most. I had never seen one in person, but the theory is that I thought I was going to love it the most. And so he, I pestered him for I think it was only like 6 months on this one, and he was same thing as the O2. It was astronomical, the asking price he wanted for it, and I think there's a chance at that time, kind of when all the stuff is going crazy, that it was reasonable, but it was that point where I was like, "Hey, dude, this stuff is like, it's kinda scary to buy this stuff at this level of cards because who knows what's gonna happen in the future, if it's gonna continue declining in value and stuff like that." And so I was trying to work, and I was being honest, but I was trying to, of course, work that angle. I was taking the risk there, and, um, eventually he listed on eBay and, like, I don't know if it was to get me
I
to want it more. He
I
didn't
was
need to
gonna say, I
do
think I
that.
remember this. It wasn't listed long. Now that you say this, I'm like, holy crap! I think I remember this being on there for like not even a day, right? It was only a couple hours or something.
Yeah, it was up there for a day, and it
I
was
mean,
at
a
a
high
pretty high.
price, very very high price, though, if
Yes.
I recall. Yep.
Yeah, so he might have listed it twice even because the first time, like, it was the super high price time, and I think he took it down. And then we came around, and this is when it got a little more serious, and he listed it again. And again, I don't know if it was to try and get me to want it more, if he was more so just trying to figure out the value, because who knows?
Yeah.
It was his card, he wanted the most money out of it. But when he listed it, I wanted it, and I wanted a ton. But when he listed it, I was like, dude, what are you doing? And so like waiting, like not just buying it and figuring out what it costs. And so we kind of came to a number where it was super high. It was high, especially for that time because we didn't know anything. And I remember I messaged remember PK, the
Yep.
Jags collector, PK32. I messaged him because he actually knew the owner of it, and just from I don't know, he knew the owner of it, and I'd never done a deal with this guy, and I was like, hey, this is where he's out on it. What do you think? And dude, I literally was like, I think these we got to the point of like almost agreeing to a price, and it was time for bed. It was like at this point, it's like midnight or something dumb.
Yeah.
But I was doing this all night, and I'm laying there and I can't sleep. It was so stupid. I'm like, dude, I'm like, do I buy this? It's a lot of money. Do I buy this? Whatever. And finally, PK was like, dude, you're an idiot. Like, what are you waiting for? And so like I messaged the guy in the middle of the night. I messaged the guy, and I was like, screw it, let's do it, man. And I bought this along with a few, not the O2, but it was a different card to try and bring like the price down some on it, um, to try and make myself feel better about it. But again, like it was one of those cards where I certainly paid high on it at the time, or higher than what I think most people would have been willing to pay, especially at that time period. But it's another card where I'm just so grateful that I did, because I would certainly pay a lot more than I paid to get another copy for it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good way to sanity check yourself and say, okay, in hindsight, now this was a good deal. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So then you've hinted at the last card here a little bit, but I love you can touch on this one here.
So the last card is the '06 Finest Gold X Factor PSA 9 of Brady. And I don't know what my second favorite card is out of all these, honestly. It's I think it's the O2 and maybe this one are like tied as my second favorite. I haven't been able to make that decision, but this is certainly like up there as top three cards for me. Like we mentioned, I love the design of '06. It's so simple, and that's kind of how I am. I love this. I love simple designs for the most part, but the '05 kind of ruins that. Um, but yeah, it's just so clean, and it's '06 is such a good year. Um, Once I got the '05, this became that card where I was like, okay, let's try and find one of these. And so, um, what I did was, and I think a lot of the success I've had in finding these is doing the research and putting myself in the best position to find these cards, to the point, like even something as simple as understanding a pop report. Um, like the pop on this, I think there's only two copies graded across both grading companies, at least
Wow.
recently, and they're both PSA nines. And then I went back in Card Ladder and I looked up the pop in regards to like not the pop, the sales history of like I was matching serials basically, trying to figure out truly how many are out there, and I realized that it was going to be impossible unless I went after the only copy that I knew of. And so Joe TB12 cards, he owned this card, and I had asked him about it for a while. This is in 2023. Um, I asked him about it for a while, and he always told me to take a lap. And then we got to a point where he was actually kind of willing to talk about it with me, and I was like, "Wow, this is interesting." But again, he wanted more, and rightfully so. He wanted more than what I was willing to pay based on that era, because this is 2023 when stuff like that. That December 2022 was when it was the mass exodus, all that kind of stuff. And so, again, it was like this is a gamble, but I love this card. What do I do here? How much more am I willing to pay than what I'd love to pay? Because you always have the price of like, I think this is fair and I'd love to pay this. And you have to figure out what the maximum is above that you're willing to go.
Yep.
And so I asked him forever, and we were relatively close, but not really. Percentage wise, I think he probably wanted like 50% more than I was willing to pay. And it's a big card, so 50% is a lot of money. Um, and so he said he was going to bring it to national. This is 2023. He said he was going to bring it to national, and we didn't really talk about it prior. And then we got there, and I was like, "Did you bring it?" And he's like, "I did." And so I think I was there for like 3 days. I left the fourth or something like that. And the first few days, we didn't really talk about it much because honestly, like I was just so like when I go to national, I've only been to two, but I hang out with Joe and then Paulie's 401 cards. I hang out with them the most, and those are like some of the most fun times. Like in my card experience, is just hanging out with them has been some of the most fun times in general. And so I think it was just like we were having fun hanging out and stuff. But then eventually it was like the third day was kind of my last full day, and I was like, dude, you got it. What are we doing here? Like this is like when I go to nationals, I have a very specific plan of what I want, and who's involved in that, all that kind of stuff, and from the card perspective. And so finally, the third day, I was like, "Hey, what are we doing here?" And he still wanted more than I was willing to pay. And sorry, that was the second night. I said that to him, and then we went to bed or whatever. Next morning, I go to they had a booth. Him and Paul had a booth. I go to their booth, and he has it sitting in the showcase.
I see. I
And it was
remember seeing it there. I was waiting for you to
okay.
say that. I was like, he did the same thing, except it wasn't eBay this time. It
Yep.
was the
He
national.
he put it in there. There's no price on it. He put it in there. It was the top left corner, and I walked up to the showcase, and I could see it from like 15 feet away
A
before
mile
I got
away.
over there. Yep, and because there's nothing that shines like these. There's not a lot that shines like these.
Yeah.
And so, but I saw it and I was like, okay, there's no way that's the '06 finest gold sitting in a showcase. I walk up there and I was like, you clown, there's no way you're doing this. And I think Paul had mentioned that some people had come by and like looked at it and stuff, and I was like, all right, this is absurd. And so I said, hey, how about you remove this from your showcase, and then so we can figure out what we're gonna do here. And fortunately, he did, and nobody bought it that day, thank God. And that night, we went back to Joe's room. So Joe was the one that hosted that Manning Brady hangout where we
Mhm.
first met in person. Um, and so we sat there, and him and I still couldn't agree on a number. I was like, dude, I was kind of at a point where I was like, I feel like I'm paying strong, and this is a gamble that I'm not willing to take. And so
So you gave
finally,
him a bunch more of Kevin's moonshine and then
exactly. So Paul was there, and so what ended up happening was he wanted a card from Paul, and so he
Mhm.
said to Paul, he's like, "How about we trade?" So he got the card from Paul. Paul now has the card that I want, and so Paul holds it hostage, assuming that he's going to get an amount of money from me that he would have sold that card for to Joe. And it was better for me because I I think Paul was closer to what I wanted to pay than what Joe wanted for it, and then we just kind of sat there and tried to figure it out. And it was funny because I remember, like, I think that was the night where we were all coming up to the room, and Paul and I were like in the middle of trying to figure it out, and a few of the guys had come up, and I was like, dude, this is not the time. Like, we need to go figure this out. So we went downstairs. I don't know where you stayed. I think we stayed at one of the ones that was connected. There was like
Yep.
a Starbucks down there, and we're sitting in the Starbucks thing talking about it. And finally, we agreed on it. And still, it was more than I wanted to pay, but he's willing to take on some trade and stuff. And what I ended up doing was I said, okay, if you're going to pay up for this card, you need to figure out what you're going to sell, obviously. And so that's when I sold my O2 Finest Gold to Joey, because I said, this card is a ghost. Like we mentioned, last sale was 2011, I think, but you're going to bet on yourself that you're going to find another copy because, based on Pop Report and stuff like that, this other card you truly don't have another chance at, most likely. And so I sold that to Joey to fund part of it. And then also I brought the Manning, the Select Black 101 Manning that I sold to Drake, and that was part of the plan as well. Going to national, I said, you may have to sell this, and Drake was the person that I was going to ask if he wanted it because it was going to take a significant amount of money to move it because of what I believed in the card and stuff. And so I lined those deals up with them, and I said, okay, we're good to go here. And so we finally agreed on it, and I left the national with that card, and I left it with the 2013 Select Gold. So I was a very happy individual.
Wow. Yeah, that was a thrill to listen to, especially being connected somewhat just from again being there, but not knowing a deal was going down, but just remembering that night and everything. So that's yeah, that is absolutely awesome. And I love again, like there's just something to be said. I don't know how you feel about this to kind of close out here before we do a fast five, but I love about '05 and '06 the pairings. Like any of these sets where you can pair two things up, I just think are so sad. It's just so satisfying to me. Something about the two cards going together like a puzzle, like the
Yeah.
'05, '06 here, even the '02s, again, like the golds and the X Fractors. You think back in the past, the credentials, the now and the future. Everyone wants to pair these things up. I don't know why that is, why that's in our head, but I'm always thinking that way. So I'm sure for you, when you were able to, complete this pairing, I'm sure that was a thrill.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why 0506 is so awesome too, because there's parity there, and they're such nice looking cards, but it's one of those things where, like, it's just dumb luck that they did that. It's dumb luck that they put the gold X out of 10 for those 2 years, and that was the end of it. It's dumb luck that they had those same parallels for those 2 years, like the Mosaics 2010, 2011. Why did they do that? Nobody knows. It's just those dumb random things that end up working out long term that we all end up somehow loving.
Yeah,
So
I'm
I
sure
completely
that.
agree.
Yeah, and there's no way they had enough feedback at that time. I mean, I'm guessing maybe they left packs out and people were like, "Oh, this is cool, whatever." But it's just strange that you discontinue because nowadays with Panini, it feels like if there's anything that catches at all, we're gonna run with it for 10 years, and that would destroy
Yeah.
some of this for a lot of these, in my opinion. But
I agree. That's what, like, one of the Prism arguments is like the legacy to it. But that's one of the reasons why I love what we're into
mhm.
is because you have to figure out what the cool cards are. It's not just, oh, the golden prism out of 10 is cool for those 12 years. You have to figure out what you like, and so much of it was just random that a lot of it ended up working. At least the
Yep,
cards that we ultimately like.
totally. Dude, I'm like, my mouth hurts from smiling. I love those cards. This is fun. Um, all right, so a fast five. So you've listened, we kind of end with
Yeah.
five quick things, unless Austin was out too late the night before and he's tired. But that's not the case today. I've been responsible this week. So first question that came to mind: what does the word magical mean to Gunther? The reason I
That's an
ask
awesome
this for
question.
those that aren't listening, Every time Gunther posts on a story, it's either three things: he's complaining about football and bad players, he's sharing someone else's cool card, and then the adjective magical is at the top, or he's posting an Instagram post for the first time in like 3 months, and then Instagram gets shut down because it's just so popular. But yeah, so what does magical mean to you?
That's a hilarious summary and an accurate summary of my story posts. But it's so dumb because I've gotten to the point where I use it in real life. Like I'm talking about something like to my wife or something, and the way I describe it is magical. It's so dumb. It's a hilarious
You're
word. The funny thing is
Sponsored by Disney or something, maybe.
exactly.
Uh,
The funny thing when I first started using it or like saying it again, it's just random. But like people thought that I literally wanted like magic cards, like Magic the Gathering cards, and I'm like, dude, I honestly don't even know what Magic the Gathering is. Like I posted it once, and somebody sent me like a PwC salesperson sent me like, hey, this card is a Magic card that we have for sale. I'm like, dude, I don't even know what that is. And that's oh no, and then also Magic Johnson was the other thing that people thought. But eventually it got to the point where it's like, no, this clown is just referring to a card as magical because he thinks it's cool. And so I guess the definition of magical is just when you get a card and it's one of those cards like with the 17 gold glass, you just get it and you're like, wow, this is awesome. And it temporarily leaves you speechless. And it's one of those cards where it's just, wow, this is magical. So there's no definition. It's more so, I guess, just a reaction as a clown to certain cards.
yeah, that makes sense. That's funny. I had to hit you with that one. I thought that'd be a
Yeah,
good
it's a great
starter.
question.
So talk a lot about finest. I'm curious from your perspective, just on if you had to collect one or the other. Do you prefer Bowman Chrome or Topps Chrome from your side of things? If you're again talking Tom Brady cards and you could only collect, his run, whatever the run of those sets, what would you go after if you had to pick?
That's difficult. Um, that's a great question. Yeah,
Take your
the
time.
issue, yeah, the issue is that the 2003 Topps Chrome Gold X Factor out of 101 is one of my favorite cards, and I it's always been one of my favorite cards. And so the issue is that I love that card so much, but I don't really care about much of the rest of the Topps Chrome years. Like you've talked about and Brett's talked about and stuff like the random numbers and stuff they did. Obviously, there was some continuity when it was out of 49, out of 50 and stuff, but I also just don't like a lot of the years. Like I only like 2010, 2011, 2003. And the issue is they didn't have golds in like 05, 04, all that kind of stuff. It was just, and then 06 was the random red background with and I was like, what are we doing here? So I guess I'd have to say Bowman Chrome because there's more that I like. Like
Mhm.
there's more years. Like I don't mind, like I like the '02 Bowman Chrome Gold. I meant to say this earlier. This is a nerd thing, but I'm going to say it real fast. The '02 Finest Gold, it's his first gold, and so because he didn't have a Topps Chrome Gold until '03, so '02 are his first golds. So he's the Bowman Chrome and the Finest Gold. So and people always say those are his first, as if there's two of them. But if you look it up, the Finest 2002 Finest was released prior to 2002 Bowman Chrome, so it's technically the first.
I'm glad
And
you
it
said
doesn't
that because
matter.
I've always had to put the disclaimer. I always think that way. There's two of them or whatever, right? But I'm glad you
Yeah.
said that 'cause I never knew that. That's good to know.
Yeah, I looked it up recently because I was like, all right, let's figure out which one was actually first, and it was '02 Finest. But yeah, so point is, Bowman Chrome most likely just because there's more that I like, but the '03 Topps Chrome would be my favorite out of any Bowman Chrome card that you could offer me. So
Yeah,
kind of a strange answer, but
makes sense. No,
not something I've ever thought about either. It's a good question.
yeah, no, for sure. Um, all right, so next question. Hypothetically, if you had to collect a teammate of Brady, is there anyone that you would pick if you were forced to, like that you would collect maybe same era, different era, just any players that come to mind?
I've considered that recently. We talked about what do you do once you have all the cards, and I've thought about trying to find another player that brings me the same or similar level of excitement. And some guys that I've considered was Gronk, but
Mhm.
Gronk is completely occupied by old Chico. Um,
Yeah, there's a what's his Instagram? It's something.
uh, yeah,
I
his
remember.
last name's Pacheco, but I think it's actually the Instagram's actually Chico, but it's like the ultimate Gronk PC.
Yeah, there you go.
Um,
Ultimate Gronk PC. Yep.
Yeah, but I think his handle is not that. But it's completely occupied by him. He has every finite. He has every card you could want. So I was like, all right, well, that's clearly not going to happen. And then I considered Moss, and so I think my answer would be Moss, just because
Mhm.
like those are some of my favorite memories. Like I failed to mention why I even collect Brady, but like those years with Moss and Brady are some of my favorite years. I remember like from when I was a kid and stuff. And so I think it would be Moss. But similarly, Moss has a lot of collectors as well.
Yeah.
it'd be a lot of competition and money I'm not putting into the cards that I actually want of Brady.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Fourth question is kind of similar question. I've hit you with a lot of these hypotheticals, but I think just because they're fun to hear your, what you think. What about autos or patches? You only do one or the other. I've asked other people this, but not in a long time. But if you can only do like on card autos or game used patches, not both, like which would you pick just from your perspective as a collector?
Yeah, it's funny. I think we're similar in this, where I just don't care for either of them really. I just like the shiny cards, but I think I would choose patches. Like immediate reaction was just patches. I don't. This is just how my brain works. I don't see a lot of excitement in an autograph. Like,
Hmm.
cool, the athlete was with a Panini representative and signed the card, but like you don't have a connection to that. They signed the card and then they gave it to them, and then you eventually owned it. I don't know. I feel like I didn't really articulate it that well, but I just don't really. It doesn't excite me. I don't really care. It's cool that he signed it and all, like it's his signature, but at the end of the day, he just signed a piece of paper. I'd rather have a card that actually excites me. And so I think the patch more so does that, in that it's a little closer to him, in that it's a piece of the jersey. And I think it has a lot to do with when I was little, all I cared about was patch cards, which is funny because now I don't care about them at all. But I think like the aspect of like owning a part of a jersey that like was actually used in a game by them, would be cool.
Awesome. Then final question, what's a card you wish you could get back? I know again we talked about how both of our journeys involve buying and selling a lot of cards to get to the point where we're at now and collecting them. What's that one that got away? Is there any that come to mind?
This is interesting. The issue is that I have all the cards that I want, but if I were to expand the list, I think maybe one of the finites.
Mhm.
But the issue is that like I sold them at prices where it's like there's a 0% chance that I'd rather have the card than what I sold them at. But there's a lot of cool stories along with like the 2018. I slept in an airport overnight to get it. All this kind of cool stuff. There's some crazy stories with those kind of cards, to where it'd be cool to have them for the story's sake. Um, but I ultimately love what I have. But if you maybe give an answer, I'd probably say one of those finites, just because um, there's only one of them, and outside of the two tops or the two Panini cards that I mentioned, I think a finite would be a third card that I'd like to own.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you, Mr. Gunther, sir. That was a lot of fun. Super, super, super fun. Really appreciate it. And again, I hope you have a great week. This is awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. It was fun.